fear them. Do not fear any of them.
A very, very good morning. Friday the 24th of October 2025. My name is Raja Mia. This is a Recusant 9 transmission. These are emergency transmissions. Every now and then we put these forward when things of extreme significance take place. Information that you must know, and we've used these emergency transmissions over the last 5 or 6 years to absolutely destroy the political leadership in my hometown. So I think this is the first one of them that we're doing on a national scale, on a national issue. So very, very good morning to all of you. My name is Raja Mia. I have been at this for 7 years. Those of you who joined me last night will know. Yes, indeed, mate. Will know that I did two things. One was around Keir Starmer and Jess Phillips, and I went to bed not satisfied with that, and I woke up at 4:30 in the morning and started pulling stuff together, and now the dossier is complete. By the time this transmission is over, there will be no doubt, or there should be no doubt in anyone's mind, the Prime Minister of this country, Keir Starmer, is neck deep in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of this nation's children. I repeat, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is neck deep in the grooming and gang rape of this nation's children. The second point I released yesterday, and very, very quickly, was the survivor who had come forward to defend Jess Phillips, Samantha Walker. She's from Oldham. And what we demonstrated clearly was that she is politically motivated. She's politically motivated in the sense that, one, she is a Muslim convert, reported in the Times, by the way, so it's not just me. She's a Muslim convert. She rolls with certain interesting Pakistani men in the country, in this town, sorry. And finally, I released a recording of her on some form of podcast where she specifically makes reference to the need to hide the data of Pakistani men, or the race data, the ethnicity data, the religious data, because Reform will use it and because Tommy Robinson will use it. So this survivor, who's not a rape gang survivor, this survivor, she's not a grooming gang survivor, sorry. This survivor, who's not a grooming gang survivor, a Muslim convert, rolls with some of these Pakistani men in the town, is now campaigning to support Jess Phillips, whilst the recording has emerged that shows that she is campaigning because she sees the bigger picture. That's her words, bigger picture. And then she talks specifically about the need to make sure that this information is suppressed so that neither Reform nor Tommy Robinson can use it. That is the truth. Simple as that. You need to like, you need to share. And my preference is, what I'm going to share now and do with you now, my preference is that someone like Black Belt Barrister, someone like that, would have done this because he's got millions of people who engage with him. I have a handful. Okay, because this is not what I do. This is not what I do. So if anyone knows him, send him the link, send him the stuff, and I'm sure he'll get it out, or others will get it out. Okay. As always, yes, please, but just before we start, click the like button if you can, please. And please, 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 the vast majority of you are not signed up to this. It's a simple newsletter. It's completely free. You only pay if you want to. redwallonarabble.co.uk. And that here, which is if you wanted to buy me a coffee. Thank you. Let me put the QR code in the corner there. Okay. Ready? For decades, Britain's most vulnerable girls were betrayed by the very institutions meant to protect them. Now, as survivors continue to fight for truth, the government's long-promised national inquiry stands exposed as another political exercise in damage control. When challenged in Parliament, the Prime Minister didn't just evade scrutiny. He delivered a statement so inconsistent with the record that it cannot be dismissed as an error. It was an attempt to rewrite the origins of the inquiry itself, to shift blame and to conceal the truth from the public again. And I'm very clear that the Prime Minister is a liar. And by the time we finish, you will see how he is a liar. Some context, because a lot has happened in an extremely short amount of time. I won't keep you long, but some context. 1, Sunday, survivors started to walk out. Fiona Goddard, Eliane Reynolds were the first 2 to go. Now there's 5, yeah? Following the resignation of these key survivors from the government's National Grooming Gang Inquiry Panel, The Guardian reported that the crisis stemmed from the composition of the inquiry shortlist. Survivors and campaigners had long called for a judge to be chair of the inquiry, someone independent, someone with legal authority, and hopefully immune from political influence. Instead, the shortlist included a police officer and a social worker. The choice of a former senior police officer, Jim Gamble, provoked particular alarm. Gamble has a history of political involvement, having been a Labour Party member and activist, and I use that word intentionally, Jim, if you're listening and your lawyers are listening, activist, because this is how I quantify it, who campaigned to expand the Labour Party's presence into Northern Ireland. And he described his work as supporting people who aspire to political office. That's what makes you an activist. To survivors, this looked less like independence or more like a political stitch-up, an attempt to ensure the inquiry remained under government control. As backlash grew, the safeguarding minister Jess Phillips issued a statement published in The Guardian. Actually, what was published in The Guardian was part of a letter she had sent, I think, to the Home Affairs Committee, Home Affairs Select Committee, one of the Home Affairs Committees anyway. Phillips defended the government's position. At that point, there was no mention of judges being excluded. In fact, Phillips had explicitly referenced to candidates from the judiciary just 48 hours before Keir Starmer issues his statement in PMQs. She confirms that judges had been considered. And I'll just very quickly, I'll bring up the article so you can see it. This is the article it's in. Starmer's grooming gang inquiry left in turmoil. And you've got to go somewhere near the bottom and you can see there, just at the top, it has further been reported that no judicial candidates have been willing to take on the role. This too is categorically untrue. And that is from Jess Phillips in a letter to the Home Affairs Committee. Fact. Complete fact. Now to the Prime Minister. Clipped it last night for you, so those of you watching it last night, don't worry, it's not long. It's just 90 seconds, but it's 19 valuable seconds.
So yes, the victims are right to be worried. He also talked about looking for a chair. It has been 10 months since we first called for a national inquiry. 10 months. It is shocking that they still do not have a chair. One of the final 2 candidates, Mr. Speaker, has pulled out, leaving a former police officer that the victims don't want. What they do want is a judge. They deserve a judge. So, Mr. Speaker, we are talking now. We are talking about the industrial scale rape of women and girls. Unlike most of the inquiries going on, why is it that this inquiry doesn't deserve a judge?
Prime Minister.
Can I answer that? It's a serious point, Mr. Speaker, because whether it should be Judge Les was looked at by Louise Casey, and she decided against that for a reason, and her reasons were twofold. I'll spell them out. The first was the speed with which we could do this. It would have been. They asked the question, and the first was the speed with which we could do this. The second is really important, and that is that at the same time as the inquiry, I was absolutely determined that criminal investigations would go on at the same time. One of the problems that judge-led inquiries run into, I've seen and experienced this myself, is that they're often held back until the end of the criminal investigations. And I was determined that we'd be able to run the two together. And it's because of that, Mr. Speaker, that we've been able to reopen 1,200 historic cases at the same time.
Okay. Played it. Word for word. No editing, nothing. I just clipped that segment out. 90 seconds. You can see the Prime Minister rules out a judge-led inquiry, and that's at Prime Minister's Questions this Wednesday, which is 2 days after When asked why the shortlist for the national inquiry had not included a judge, as you can see, the Prime Minister gives a completely different account during Prime Minister's questions time to what Jess Phillips had said in her letter. And I'll read out what he says. Can I answer that? It's a serious point, Mr. Speaker, because whether it should be judge-led was looked at by Louise Casey, and she decided against that for a reason. And her reasons were twofold. I'll spell them out. The first was the speed with which we could do this. That's one. The second is really important, and that is that at the same time as the inquiry, I was absolutely determined that criminal investigations would go on at the same time. One of the problems of the judge-led inquiries run into, I've seen and experienced this myself, is that they're often held back until the end of the criminal investigations, and I am determined that we'd be able to run the two together. And it's because of that, Mr. Speaker, that we've been able, we've been able to reopen 1,200 cases at the same time. That is word for word what he said. And he is not just the Prime Minister, former Director of Public Prosecutions. He knows his words. Agreed? Watch what I now do to him. 1. He claimed Louise Casey had already ruled out a judge. Whether it should be judge-led was looked at by Louise Casey, and she decided against that for a reason. His exact words. In that single line, the Prime Minister shifted responsibility for a political decision onto someone else. By invoking Baroness Louise Casey's authority, he implied that the decision not to appoint a judge was based on her independent recommendation rather than the government's own preference. When journalists looked for evidence, several outlets repeated the claim that Casey had proposed a different kind of inquiry from traditional judge-led models. I'll show you, he says. This is the Guardian article. Grooming gang inquiries, how it will help victims and affect the law. It's saying now it's more than 4 months old, as in 4 months is old news. It's not old news at all. Baroness, in the Guardian, it makes reference that Baroness Louise Casey's recommended a national inquiry that would be a different kind to past proceedings. Not an overarching judge-led process, but instead a series of local investigations directed and overseen by a national commission with statutory powers. And that's the Guardian, the 16th of June 2025. You'll find it there. I'm showing you the screens on purpose so you can see where I'm getting the evidence from. Okay? Here is another one, just so you see it. Grooming inquiry to oversee local investigations to avoid delays, June the 15th, 2025. And that's in the Times, and you can see Baroness Casey again there. And within this article, there is a quote, and it's her audit said the inquiry should review cases of failures of obstruction by statutory services to identify localities where local investigations should be instigated. It's added that the new model was designed to avoid the delays of large judge-led inquiries by combining statutory authority with targeted local action. So on the surface, these summaries seem to support the Prime Minister's account. They do not reflect what Baroness Casey actually said when she gave evidence to the Home Affairs Select Committee. What the press did was paraphrase her structural model, not at all her view on who should chair the inquiry. Baroness Casey did not say a judge should not chair the inquiry. And that is what the Prime Minister is saying very clearly, and he's being clear with his words. The man is a liar. And he's neck deep in the cover-up of the gang rape of children. And I will demonstrate more. Here is The actual transcript of what Baroness Casey said from the Home Affairs Committee, it's lifted directly from the webpage. Directly from the webpage. You've got to read it, or I've read it. You can see. Question 10. Do you see it? Joanne Reid asked the question. Do you have any thoughts about whether the National Inquiry should have official input from devolved government so we can get that broad bush learning across the UK? So that's the question. I would be disappointed if the opportunity of a national criminal investigation was missed here, because, let's face it, I can move from Scotland to England pretty easily, and criminals do. Blah, blah. Yeah, what I have in my mind is slightly different from a 7-year judge-led inquiry. That's the quote they're using. Ideally, we would have something that got into local areas. What she has in her mind is slightly different from a 7-year judge-led judge-led national inquiry. In her oral evidence to the Home Affairs Select Committee, Casey describes this in full. You've got to look through it. What she's proposing is a national statutory inquiry with full powers, but one that is structured through local investigations or hubs where the work actually happens. The National Commission would have oversight, direction, and the power to compel evidence, while the local components would focus on the details, what happened, who failed, and how to put things right. That way, we get both the strengths of a statutory framework and the speed and proximity to victims that local investigations that can bring. That is what Baroness Casey is saying. She doesn't want a 7-year judge-led inquiry in the traditional sense. She is suggesting a framework. That framework is not excluding a judge. But Casey did not and does not rule out a judge as chair. 100% false. Baroness Casey did not and does not rule out a judge as chair, as the Prime Minister claims. She was describing the architecture of the inquiry, a framework combining national statutory powers with local investigations. Her point was about the structure and reach, not leadership or oversight. The Prime Minister took that structural vision and turned it into a verdict claiming Casey had decided against a judge. That is categorically not true, and the former Director of Public Prosecutions would have known that. There is no record, I can't find any record of her making or publishing any such recommendation, and her sworn testimony, because that's what this is, to the Home Affairs Select Committee, contradicts the idea that she was ruling anybody out. 100%. In short, Casey proposed a framework. The Prime Minister invented a position. Her evidence described how the inquiry should function. His version recast it as who should be excluded from leading it. The two are not the same. They will never be the same, and the man is a liar. The Prime Minister of this country is a liar, and he's lying to cover up the gang rape of little girls, because those little girls were allowed to be gang raped because Labour Party politicians sat alongside him, were partners in it. That is the reason for this cover-up. You want more? I'll give you more. He makes reference to speed. The very first was the speed with which we could do this, he says. The very first reason, was the speed with which we could do this. The Prime Minister's claim of speed already falls flat on its face. Just 2 days earlier, his own safeguarding minister, Jess Phillips, had told Parliament, and I'll quote her, "Central to our response is a statutory national inquiry under the Inquiries Act 2005. It will oversee local investigations and will have full powers to compel evidence. It will be time limited to 3 years to ensure that victims and survivors receive answers swiftly. The inquiry will examine safeguarding systems, accountability and intersections with ethnicity, race and culture, identifying failures and good practice. The inquiry will work alongside Operation Beacon Port and National Police Operation." Those are more or less word for word what Phillips said. Phillips' statement made clear that the inquiry already had a defined 3-year time frame. And that 3-year reference, Phillips, you can find Phillips is consistently made reference to 3 years throughout the period from when the inquiry was announced. Crucially, nothing in the remit she outlined to examine safeguarding systems, accountability and intersections with ethnicity, race and culture, identifying failures and good practice, nothing in that would have been slowed down by appointing a judge to chair it. She's just said what this inquiry will do. And there's nothing in what she said that inquiry will do that would have been slowed down by a judge being appointed to chair it. This is an inquiry into institutional behaviour. It is not a criminal trial. Judges have led inquiries of far greater complexity within strict timelines. The claim that judicial oversight would delay the process, which is what he's saying, the Prime Minister, the claim that judicial oversight would delay the process as set out by his own safeguarding minister is baseless. Absolutely baseless. A judge would not be investigating offenders. She would be examining the failures of agencies and public bodies, exactly the kind of inquiry that benefits from judicial independence with procedural rigour. Removing the option of a judge to chair does not make the inquiry any faster. If the Prime Minister is suggesting otherwise, once again, he is a liar. He also makes reference to parallel investigations. And I'll quote him again. The second is really important, and that is that at the same time as the inquiry, I was absolutely determined that criminal investigations would go on at the same time. And it is because of that, Mr. Speaker, that we've been able to reopen 1,200 historic cases at the same time. Word for word. Word for word. He's saying, oh, and we can't have a judge because of a parallel investigation with the police. This is his third claim. One was Baroness Casey. We demonstrated he lied. 2 was the speed. Oh, we can't have this if a judge is here. We've demonstrated it's bullshit. He's a liar. And now his third claim is that excluding a judge allowed criminal investigations to run alongside the inquiry. This claim is also farcical. Those 1,200 cases are part of Operation Beaconport. It is a separate National Crime Agency review of historic grooming gang cases. By presenting Beaconport's activity as evidence of his inquiry's effectiveness, the Prime Minister is conflating 2 entirely unrelated processes. He is using operational policing work, the reopening of these cases, as a rhetorical shield for a political decision. Appointing a judge to chair an inquiry has no bearing whatsoever on whether a police operation proceeds or how quickly it does. He's misleading you. He stood in Parliament and said this. Beaconport is an independent National Crime Agency operation, not a product of the inquiry's design. Its work is already underway and had been announced by Jess Phillips herself. I think it might have been Yvette Cooper actually, but one of them, yeah. By merging the two, the Prime Minister has misled Parliament into believing that rejecting a judge has somehow made it possible to reopen 1,200 cases, when in truth, those investigations were already being pursued under a separate mandate entirely unaffected by the inquiry's structure and most definitely its chair and who that person was, its leadership. More concerning, and I don't think he considered this when he opened his mouth, his state amounts to a silent admission that those 1,200 cases are now being handled by police outside the inquiry's remit, meaning thousands of victims' experiences will never be examined as evidence of institutional failure. But this is where the Prime Minister's account ravels completely. 2 days earlier, Jess Phillips had already defined the inquiry's remit. I read it to you. 2 days earlier, she'd already defined the inquiry's remit, telling Parliament that, quote, the inquiry will examine safeguarding systems, accountability and intersections with ethnicity, race and culture, identifying failures and good practice. That remit that the safeguarding minister stood up and announced in Parliament is about institutional behaviour. The inquiry's remit is not the reinvestigation of individual crimes. The inquiry's focus is on the systems that failed, policing, social care, political leadership and safeguarding oversight. This is an inquiry into institutional behaviour. Its purpose is not to track down rape gang members, but to expose the failures of leadership, safeguarding and accountability that allowed those gangs to operate for so long. The purpose of an inquiry like this is to uncover why, how and who in positions of authority ignored warnings, silenced victims and protected reputations instead of children, and also why these crimes happened, who committed them and how we can stop them. That is the job of a national inquiry, to confront the truth, identify the causes and make sure this never happens again. By pretending otherwise, the Prime Minister is deliberately blurring the line between criminal investigation and institutional accountability. Misleading Parliament, lying to Parliament and the public, misleading Parliament, lying to the public about what this inquiry is actually for. The inquiry is fully capable of examining those systems even while the police conduct criminal investigations. Nothing prevents this inquiry from studying how forces handled complaints, how intelligence was shared or ignored, how leadership decisions were made, or how patterns of abuse were overlooked. Nothing prevents an inquiry from doing this. These actions that I describe is actually the kind of scrutiny a judge-led inquiry was designed to perform: broad, structural and independent. So when the Prime Minister suggests that reopening 1,200 cases justifies excluding judges from the inquiry, he is misrepresenting the inquiry's scope, misleading Parliament and lying to the millions of people in this nation. Reopening cases do not restrict the inquiry's power to investigate institutional failures surrounding them. They only restrict discussions on live prosecutions, not the culture, command or decision making that allowed those cases to happen. If we follow the Prime Minister's logic, the inquiry would be reduced to examining a handful of historic cases where criminal investigations have already closed. But that is not what Jess Phillips announced to Parliament. As she told her House of Commons, and again I quote her, "This inquiry will examine safeguarding systems, accountability and intersections with ethnicity, race and culture, identifying failure and good practice." Her statement confirms that the inquiry's purpose was to identify systemic failures, not to revisit criminal trials. The Prime Minister's versions of events therefore contradict his own minister and mislead Parliament about what the inquiry is allowed to do. If he is suggesting that the inquiry cannot look at the institutional failures connected to these 1,200 reopened cases, he's lying. And if he's suggesting a judge cannot be appointed because of this reason to chair, and you believe him, more fool you. Some of you will say the Prime Minister may have misled Parliament about the reasons for excluding a judge. I'm not a sitter of the fence kind of person. The Prime Minister stood before Parliament and gave explanations that do not withstand scrutiny. His justifications for excluding a judge, Baroness cases, recommendation 1, speed 2, parallel investigations 3, are clearly false. And I've demonstrated the false. This was not a mistake. They were fabrications. I'm not here for a technical dispute. What I'm sharing with you goes to the heart of whether Britain is serious about uncovering the truth of how, for decades, in towns dominated by Labour councils, rape gangs were able to operate while public authorities looked the other way. Conservative estimates, tens of thousands. For me, it's 100,000 plus. Working class white girls were gang raped. Warnings were ignored. Offenders were shielded by systems designed to protect reputations and advance political careers instead of victims. These children were sacrificed at the altar of multiculturalism in exchange for sackfuls of postal votes. And now, instead of exposing the truth, the government has created an inquiry designed to contain it. The cover-up continues. And the Prime Minister, through his own actions and his words at Prime Minister's question time on Wednesday, is now part of the cover-up. The Prime Minister of this country, Keir Starmer, is part of the cover-up into the grooming and gang rape of our nation's children. My name is Raj Amir, 7 years, and the Labour Party have tried to have me falsely imprisoned. Labour Party politicians have tried to have me falsely imprisoned. I won every court case, and the Labour Party have attempted to sue me. All in the lead up of this scandal breaking, because for the best part of these 7 years, I and a small team have been fighting to get this news out. I am political, unashamedly so. I am a political campaigner. As you saw this, when this transmission started, I'm not a YouTuber. I had it on mute for a minute or so. This is a cover-up, and yes, I remain blacklisted by the mainstream media for bringing you the truth of the cover-up, and, unlike some of the others that occupy this space, attempting to smear me has comprehensively failed, because I have a decorated career, over 2 decades in public service, working at the forefront, fighting extremists, safeguarding children. That is who I am. This is where we are. And the rest, my friends, is up to those of you who have the sort of reach I do not have. Take my work, use it. If you need any of the links, get in touch and I'll send it you. And please, 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 if you can, support me. I will never work again because of what has taken place and the fight I've had to fight. Good morning.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
On the 20th of James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011 he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.